Hello and welcome back to the A-KID-EMIA podcast. This is episode number 15, and I'm your host, Charlotte Duffy. And today we're joined by Janelle Gagnon. She is a lab director and instructor in psychology and education at Mount Holyoke College. Today she shares with us what it was like to go from the daily crisis management of your average academic to confronting a real crisis, stage 4 cancer, while parenting a toddler. She also shares her journey as a parent to a child who later suffered sicknesses. And so she tells us how both these experiences help to change her priorities and ultimately affect the way she manages her time, including some very useful tactics for how you might manage your time effectively throughout the entire academic cycle. So without further ado, I just want to thank you for your time and for what you're about to share, because I know from our private conversations, it's pretty personal. You're sharing a serious illness journey that was, very demanding for not just you, but your whole family, and then some other things we might get to as well. So I thank you and applaud your courage for being willing to share that in a public venue. So thank you.
Thank you for
Um,
giving me the space to share.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is because, and I've said this to you before, like I think most academics are operating on a margin, right? They're usually in some kind of crisis management 24/7. But then when you come down with a serious sickness, which all of us are liable to,
Hmm.
now you're dealing with an actual crisis. This is not just want my peer review by, February 20th or something. This is like what's going to happen to my family, what's going to happen to me. And so it's a kind of limit case experience, but I like to talk to people who have these sort of extreme experiences because I think there's something universally instructive that everyone can get from it. So that's going to be the ultimate goal, is like, what can we all get from your experience? But first, I thought maybe you could just say a little bit about your current position, and to the extent you're comfortable, your family, and then we'll dive into just your story of your sickness, like what happened.
Okay, sure. So my current position is I'm a laboratory director and instructor in the Department of Psychology and Education at Mount Holyoke College. So I'm a research consultant for faculty, staff, and students. My family consists of myself, my husband Jason of almost 20 years, and then my rambunctious 11-year-old son, who is the light of my life. Where would you like me to go from there? Want
Yeah,
me to
so
talk about the illness diagnosis?
yeah, can you just tell us a little bit as you feel comfortable, like
Sure.
what you had and how long that illness lasted, and then I'll ask
Sure.
some pointers
So
from
at that time in my life, when I was diagnosed, my son was about a year and a half years old. I was working full time in my current position while finishing up my doctoral studies. I was in the thick of data collection for my own research. Um, yeah, well, first of all, I want to say is like obviously we all have experienced crisis. We all lived through COVID-19. But when you experience a profound personal crisis like this, when I received my stage 4 cancer diagnosis, um, it was profoundly humbling because I had to acknowledge my human limits. I had to acknowledge that I might face my own mortality. I had to recognize that all of the stuff that I put my energy into, my academic trajectory, my career, all of that might suddenly come to a halt and mean nothing because I might not exist in a few months from this moment. So I say it was profoundly humbling, is what I would say, and it caused me to reorder the priorities of my entire life. Uh, Especially because I had to recognize that up until that moment, I had been so focused doing stuff that I wasn't actually living a life according to my values. I was just kind of checking the boxes that I was told to check by the world. Get your education, work hard, do the things you need to do, and then you can settle in and live life. And I'd realized that what I had been living was my life and that might be the end of my life soon. The hardest part was recognizing that I might not be able to see my son grow up. Um, when I distinctly remember, this is like a flashbulb memory for me. This is initially they thought I had some sort of breast cancer because of the manifestation of my cancer. So I was at the breast cancer center and I was waiting for a prognosis from that doctor. And I remember laying on an exam table and I remember saying to God, "What, God, whatever you give me, I accept it." And I remember feeling a profound peace in that moment. That wouldn't make sense to most folks um, because it was a peace that stayed with me through my whole illness. Now, don't get me wrong. I had a lot of really dark moments, and there was a lot of pain involved in being sick with cancer, but I think relinquishing control to God, just relinquishing control and recognizing my own human limits helped me a lot with what I was facing. Another piece that was really, really important, I think important for all academics, anyone's looking for a department to work in. So when you go on to find your home to earn tenure at, I would say to folks, make sure that you look around and that academic department is a supportive place to live and raise a family. Mount Holyoke College, my colleagues were absolutely amazing, and they were an amazing source of social support. I I have a colleague who I had multiple colleagues who actually went with me to doctor's appointments, and I had one colleague, Francine Deutsch. I remember her, she yelled at the doctor to do a biopsy on me. And they did a biopsy. That's how they found the cancer. She advocated for me. They cared. And another colleague go with me to appointments to figure out what the plan was for the biopsy. But beyond that, you know how when folks have a baby, then they'll do a meal train. Well, they did what we call the chemo train for me. Sitting at chemotherapy for my husband, Jason, it was really hard on him. He was only able to sit on one session. Seeing me sick, seeing me suffer was something that caused him a lot of pain. So my colleagues organized a chemo train. So two or three colleagues would come on different shifts and sit with me for my chemotherapy sessions, which would last sometimes 3, 5, 6 hours. They were longer before I got my port placed. And that social support was huge. And so that my advice to academics is if you want to have the ability to see yourself through a crisis, a profound personal crisis, make sure you have a support system set up before that happens.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people look for that support outside of their department, but why not? Why not be the kind of colleagues who will set up a chemo train and or a meal train, you
They
know?
actually did both. I'll give them credit. They did both.
Wow. That's amazing. I mean, what an amazing department and group of friends, more than just colleagues, it sounds like. So how long did that go for? So your son is 1.5 years old. Was this like a very brief,
Yeah, so I was
fierce
diag I
battle? Or-
started he was born November 2014. I started feeling sick September 2015. I was very fatigued. I was sleeping a lot. I didn't feel right. I went to the doctors. They told me, "Oh, it's because you're a new mom." I had a lot of pain in my chest. They told me my son was too heavy for me because I was a small woman. Not that small, but I was tiny. They said, "Stop picking up your child." Do you know how heartbreaking it is to be told you can't pick up your child because your child's the source of your chest pain? Turns out the cancer had spread to the bones. So September 2015, I started feeling sick. I wasn't diagnosed until April 2016, and I was continually going to the doctor. I was getting blood work done. You could see there was a decline in my health and my blood work. So I went through chemotherapy treatments, intensive chemotherapy treatments from April 2016 until September 2016. And then I had my port removed November 2016.
Wow. Okay. So is this condensed, super intense
All
period of
before
actual
he's, yeah,
treatment?
all before he's 2 years old. All
Wow.
before he's even two.
Okay. Having a toddler can be hard enough, but and having cancer can be hard enough, but doing both. And are you working at this time? So you said you were in your PhD program and working. Is that full-time work or part-time
Yes, I
work?
was working full time. I was working in
Oh,
my current position full time. I was in my program full time. So I took a medical leave from my doctoral program. And for my job in Mount Holyoke, I took intermittent leave. So obviously, the chemotherapy days and the few days following chemotherapy when I was very sick, I didn't go into work. So intermittent leave. But I did not take full leave, and that was a choice. Even though I had the time, I chose not to. And I want to share the reason why, because in a way, it was a coping strategy for me. I started my academic trajectory I used to work full time in a factory and then go to community college full time. I went on to get my bachelor's degree working, going to school, master's degree, you get it, working full time, going to school, working full time, going to school. So I was continually busy. And why was I busy? Because when you're busy, you don't have time to self-reflect on your problems. You don't have time to self-reflect. So in a way, the work was a coping strategy. If I'm busy, I can't think about how I have cancer. In a way, it's a form of avoidant coping, a productive form in some ways, and not so productive in others. And I bring this up because the cancer the cancer caused me to realize when I got really sick. So at one point in September, before I wasn't done with treatments yet, but at the beginning of September of 2016, I got very sick with a neutropenic fever. I ended up in the oncology ward. I was in the hospital for almost a week. I was very, very sick. And then afterwards, when I was discharged, I couldn't go back to work. So I was forced to stay home. So I lost that coping strategy. And it was exactly in that moment where that sense of peace I had felt kind of fell away. And I fell into a very dark depression. And I was alone with my thoughts and I had to self-reflect. And I had to realize that up until that point, with my illness and having to face my own limitations, up until that point, my identity was built on a person that did stuff and did stuff well. I was, I, uh, I had to recognize that I can look at another person. I can look at, say, for example, a disabled person or an elderly person who's not working. I can look at other individuals and I could easily say, of course, that person has inherent dignity. Of course, that person is a person of value. But when I turned and looked back at myself, I didn't feel as though I was a person of inherent dignity, a person worthy of love if I wasn't doing stuff. I built my identity around a person that just did things. And having the cancer made me realize that I was a person of value even when I didn't do stuff. That's why I had to reorder my priorities. I had to recognize that all my accomplishments didn't make me who I am. And at the end, if I did end up dying, because I had been so very sick at that point, what would have made up the core of my life? Well, I couldn't go back and change the past, but I can certainly change the present and make the decisions I'm going to make, and I can alter the trajectory of my future if I change the guiding principle of my life. And I had to recognize that being so engrossed in my tasks wasn't a life. What I wanted to define my life from that moment was be to acknowledge my worth as a child of God and to acknowledge that if I wanted to have any life of value, it had to be a life that was framed around love. So, for example, I don't want to be that mom anymore. It's in my computer. I have to finish this email. Like if my son calls for my attention, I want to say, okay, honey, what is it? Like I want to punctuate my life with moments of love because if something were to happen to me, those moments of connection are what's really going to be left to comfort my family. Those are the moments that really give value to any human life, is the love that we leave behind. And I just had to recognize I needed to change the way that I interacted with the world and the way I thought about myself in order to have a life that was truly meaningful.
I think that's so widely applicable, actually, even if those of us listening or me speaking to never encounter, stage 4 cancer. I had a really good conversation, sort of adjacent to this, with a different scholar named Jason Brennan on how he works a 40-hour work week, which is like kind of unthinkable to a lot of academics, but he made a point very similar to what you just said, that we have this sort of cult of busyness or this learned helplessness around our work practices that just, yeah, keep us, really pacified by the constant demands on our attention. And of course, when you throw children into that, this can become even more of a concern because children, naturally and understandably do pull for your attention constantly. And so you just have this like kind of crazy work life that's keeping you busy from thinking about serious things. You have children, young children in your case, and then you get this illness that just stops everything. And so, if you can make some progress, I think, which is why I want to talk to you, on containing the crises on the day to day, you may be
That's
better.
exactly it. You got to contain it day by day, moment by moment.
Yeah, and like you never know when this is going to strike you. I mean, you were, as far as I know beforehand, a completely healthy woman. You had just given birth to, a beautiful,
Yes.
perfect child, and now you have stage 4 cancer? What? I just had a baby. What are you talking about? So I imagine there must have been some shock there for you and for your husband, just like, how did this just happen? How am I now on my deathbed when I just gave life? Um, yeah, that must have been huge. So okay, so you have this whole reorientation of your priorities. How does that start to manifest in terms of the way you actually spend your time after this? Do you
Well,
find,
I don't want to give the impression that my life is all perfect now. We are all works
yeah.
in progress.
Oh yeah, absolutely. But I imagine you
Yeah.
started to think about, maybe containing the busyness or somehow reordering things. I don't know. I'm just curious.
Yeah. So your friend there that said they contain their work to work, I do strive to limit my work hours. Um, I'm not working crazy hours anymore, that's for sure. I used to work crazy hours. Um, let's see. For me, really, what happened was is I prioritized my faith and my family. So my faith became a super priority for me because a long time I was going to school, doing all those things that I needed to do, and wasn't praying. So I reoriented my life around my faith and then just spending time trying to be present with my family and my husband and my son, planning little moments. So try not to be distracted by a device. When I leave work, that's work. If for some reason I have to bring work home in the evening, it's usually because I've prioritized some sort of family demand in the middle of the day, like I went with my husband to the doctors, for example. So,
And how does that shift from what you were doing? Were you just working like all evening,
oh,
every hour
I
would
was
just
working
be?
all the time. I was
Yeah.
working all the time. I remember I was working 70 hours a week constantly. Uh, well, it's good now. I'm not in my doctoral program. So I've got my doctorate. So that certainly lightened up the load quite a bit. Yeah, trying to think. I go to work and I do my work and then I leave and I worry about my home life. I just don't
Yeah.
worry about like I don't really answer emails in the evening anymore. I tell my students I'm explicit. Like on my course website, I'll say I don't answer emails on Sundays. You can email me. I might answer on a Saturday, but I'll be slow. So if I check, because I do care about my students too, and if there's a busy deadline, I might peek in on the email. But yeah, in general, I've set the expectation with my colleagues, and they've been very supportive of that. Um, don't expect emails from me on a Sunday. And they know too, if they send me a message, they don't expect an answer until the following day. So just setting expectations, being explicit about it. And that comes back to having a healthy workplace environment. And I do have a healthy workplace environment. I recognize too, some people are constrained if their workplace culture is not supportive of this. Mount Holyoke is amazing in that way. It's a very good workplace culture, work-life, family balance.
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how it is exactly in your discipline, but I know in my field that I think it's fair to say the humanities more generally, you don't have a lot of choice in terms of where you're working. You're lucky if you get a job at all, anywhere in the world that's more than like a year or 3 years long.
That's
So
the beauty of me being I've been at Mount Holyoke almost 20 years. I've been in my current position 16. So I also have that benefit. So I want to recognize that's a privilege I had that many young academics starting with families likely won't have. I stayed at the institution. They love me so much at Mount Holyoke. They invited me into their master's program, and I stayed working there when I was earning my doctorate. So I have a very privileged position in that respect. If you are going from visiting assistant professor position to visiting assistant professor position, you won't have that privilege.
yeah, that's a reality for sure. I mean, but it sounds though like even when you do have this ideal situation where at an institution that you love and you've been there a long time and you've settled in an area, the creep of the pressure to be productive can still make its way into your
There's,
life. And then, you go through this experience, it just kind of shuts that off for you, it sounds like.
well, the thing too with me, Charlotte, is I am extremely efficient. And I pay attention to when I am at my best to complete certain tasks. For example, I know I write well in the morning, so I will do my research or my writing in the morning, and I can do other tasks like managing my course website and grading in the afternoon. So another key of having a balanced life is knowing when you're best productive. So you have to know yourself. Know thyself is what they say. And it comes to academic productivity as well.
Yeah, I've heard this so many times in so many episodes from everyone who's productive. They always say, know when you are productive, know for how long that window lasts, and only work for that time. There are
Yes.
diminishing marginal returns, as Jason Brennan said, and Christopher Tolson had the same sort of idea.
As a
And
general rule, Charlotte, I'm usually about 2 weeks ahead of my workload. So
yeah,
that way, if something falls apart, I miss a day, my son's sick, I have to go to the doctor with my husband, I'm already ahead of my workload. But that efficiency comes with time. I'm not building courses for the first time. I'm revamping courses for fun because I'm bored with them. It's a different stage. It's more of like a mid-career academic stage.
yeah, I mean that's fair. I think that's a reasonable point. And also you know yourself better too, which is valuable. But when you're going through this traumatic sickness, it sounds like you actually are very early career. And so, I mean, not just early career, but also early in parenthood as well. So you learn a
Oh
huge amount
yeah.
on this side and a huge amount on this side, and like trying to stay alive the whole time. So, I think, yeah, you're right to point out that crisis management probably is more common at the beginning, both of parenthood and of your professional journey. But I guess, was there anything you took away from how you had to deal with that whole situation that you have gone on to apply later on in your career? Or was it just such a unique experience that really the lesson is just how you should think about your life as a whole more broadly?
I would say that. Yeah, how you should think of your life as a whole more broadly. And then kind of revisiting it and reflecting. So we can't just have a moment in time and then just switch gears and then operate in a new mode. Like I take time and I self-reflect, and make adjustments as needed. Pay attention to your body, pay attention to your emotions. If you're not feeling well, ask yourself, what is my body trying to tell me and how can I make adjustments? Am I experiencing burnout right now? So if I feel like I have too much on my plate, I can go to my academic supervisors. I can go to the chairs of my department and let them know, like, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now. In fact, they just asked me that. And I said, no, I'm not. So again, clear communication with your colleagues. But again, that's predicated on having a good social support system in the workplace.
Yeah, I think in my discipline, those conversations, my sense at least, is that you should be very select about who you disclose that to because
I'm so sorry. Yeah, I
I
don't
mean,
have that experience at all.
yeah, I'm not saying, I don't mean to
I'm
make it
very
specific to my
outspoken.
workplace, but I think in my discipline generally, there's a sense that like, everyone in philosophy should be productive and, I don't know.
When I was a young academic, I just grinned and bared it too.
Yeah. Well, so that's an interesting comment because I've wondered actually in doing these conversations how much of my sense of what's expected of me is actually just proceeding from my own ignorance and overestimation of what's really expected versus like whatever the actual real expectations are. So I think when
Oh,
you're young and
pre-tenure, your workload is extreme.
you what? Oh,
Your
pretend.
pre-tenure, early academic, your workload is extreme. You're building a name for yourself, you're getting publications out. Yeah, to say that that pressure is just internal and not external to you, I think would be false. There certainly is a pressure for you.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think you're right about that for sure. So okay, so we've talked about the professional side, but what was it like working while sick and parenting a young child? I mean, that alone is very difficult.
Yeah,
A
the
lot.
working while sick, the work I honestly said work was like my vacation place because then I wasn't dealing with my hyperactive, full of energy son. And my colleagues were supportive. So work Work was work. I have no complaints about that. I just did what I needed to do. Teaching was a nice distraction. Mentoring my students was a nice distraction. But home was really, really hard. So I couldn't do the things I normally needed to do. I had a port place, so even holding my son was difficult because I was afraid he was going to hit my port, my port for my chemotherapy. My mother-in-law helped a lot. She helped watch our son. And so that's how I made it work at home. Um, Yeah, it was hard. I think honestly, for the most part, I tried my hardest to keep things as normal as possible at home because I didn't want to be seen as a sick person because I told myself I was strong because that was how I tried to like face my illness. I was like, I remember walking up the stairs at the cancer center and every step, even though I was out of breath and I had tachycardia, I'd say, "You are strong. You are strong. You can do this. You are strong." And I used to push people who were sick with from their own chemotherapy in their wheelchairs. I'd push wheelchairs. I'd tell myself, even though I was going through chemotherapy too, I would tell myself, I'm strong. I can do this. So that was a mindset for me. But also, I want to keep things as normal as possible for my son because I know in terms of like development, the young years are so important for shaping a child and their personality and their life. In fact, my son, he has anxiety now. And I'm sure some of it is from the fact that I was away from the house in the hospital when he was so young. I kept it normal as a way to give him a normal childhood as much as possible, even though I was so sick. It, I just didn't want that to be it's hard to say it wasn't the center of our life because it was so profound, but I didn't want that to be the focus of everything, just try and enjoy him as best I could, as ill as I was. I was sitting in a rocking chair and I couldn't take care of him and still trying to enjoy his laugh and recognizing I might not get to hear that laugh much longer.
Wow. Wow. What do I even say to that? I mean, what a sacrificial approach to a situation that's so difficult personally to say, you know what, I'm having this problem. This is really hard for me. I love you, and I don't know how long I'm even going to be here to appreciate this, but this is your childhood, and I'm going to do what I can to make that, be as full and as rich as is within my power to do at this moment. So, a beautiful,
I, yeah,
beautiful guys.
I remember he had a little toy where you could record messages to it. It's like just a little toy that a little 2-year-old would have. And I remember recording to it, I love you. Um, I love you. And I left a little private message for him with the thought that if I didn't live, he would have that recording to hold on to.
Wow, unreal. I mean, that's just so, yeah. I mean, in the day to day and the busyness of academia, we don't consider how possible these things are for us. But um, sickness can come in any shape or form. And I'll go to this next point because you said that you were fine doing this, but you have dealt not only with your own personal sickness, but with some of the sickness you've alluded to already with your child. So you have actual experience on the other side of things too, being a caregiver to someone who needs, extra attention. And so, I think for people who may be listening or wondering about parenthood, wondering, can I do this and do academia, academics? What happens if I get sick? What happens if I have a child who's sick? Like, what would you say to such a person?
What would happen if you were
Yeah,
capable
like
of
what's it like?
facing?
What's it like,
Oh,
to
yeah.
have
Well,
that
yeah, I want to
experience?
I also want to share it's like at this moment in time, yeah, my son, he had high needs, but those didn't really manifest until he entered the school years. What was really hard for me was my father was sick with cancer at the same time and my mother was very sick. So I was actually caregiving at the same time I was sick. We're called
Whoa.
the sandwich generation. That honestly was really hard. So what would I say to someone facing that in academia and the what if, what if, what if? I would say recognize your human limits. Give yourself grace. If you need to fall apart for a moment, have a good cry, and then sit down and figure out what are you realistically capable of doing? What are you realistically capable of doing? Where can you get support? And what are you willing to let go or pause so that you can make it through to the other side? That's what
Okay.
I would say.
So the plot has thickened. So not only are you in school full time, working full time, sick full time, parent full time, now you're also caregiving full time to people who have the same
To the
disease.
best of my ability, yeah. So I remember
Wow.
I would go into the cancer center and the cancer center nurses would check on me while they're working with my dad. That was really hard.
Wow. Oh man. What a
But
trial.
I wasn't, yeah, so I wasn't, mom and dad were sick. They would take turns being sick and they would live with us. And so, yeah, I just did what I could each day. I think that part of my coping, so see how I made work a coping strategy. So if I focus on mom being sick, or if I focus on dad's illness, so dad's cancer was terminal. Mine, I had a shot of a cure. So if I focus on dad, or if I focus on mom, if I don't focus on myself, that is also was a coping strategy for me.
I see. So you turned outward to help yourself out
Yes.
inwardly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's still very generous and beautiful of you. And from what you've shared previously, you did ultimately confront those deeper inner questions and challenges, and seem to have carried the answers you found forward into how you have lived now your healthy life.
Yeah.
Um, so, I
I say
mean,
for the hard part was like the time management and juggling. So my son, his health challenges, like the dyslexia didn't emerge until he entered school, but he had plagiocephaly before that. So it was managing his therapies, his physical therapies that he had, and then everyone else's doctor's appointments. I'm just a
what
master of time management. I got that's all I've got
what's
to say.
plagiocephaly? What is plagiocephaly?
Plagiocephaly is when your skull isn't quite lined up right, so he had to wear a special helmet.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And we would have to go to doctor's appointments to get the helmet adjusted, and he'd have to get physical therapy because he also had torticollis, which is shortened neck muscle. So he had to get physical therapy to stretch that out.
Okay. And so are those illnesses that are sort of acute, like they have a beginning, they have an end, whereas the dyslexia is a little more long
Correct.
term.
Yeah, so he's been treated for the plagiocephaly. The treatment's ended. And that ends at a very young stage because your skull, fuses. You can only make
Right.
adjustments to that so long.
Oh, I see. Okay. But then these other illnesses have actually required, I mean, my understanding of dyslexia in childhood is that it does take a lot of involvement from the parent. You can go and get help outside, but you have to do things at home. And so it's a
Yes,
lot, it's
that
actually pretty demanding on the
it,
parent.
it was humbling because I'm an educator. I always identified as being a teacher. Even when I was like 9, 10 years old, I used to play school with siblings. Um, it's my calling. And to recognize I couldn't teach my own son was really humbling. So humbling. But he's doing well now. We've advocated for him. He has a wonderful, amazing tutor. He was just tested, and now he went from the 1st percentile for his reading after almost 2 years, year and a half, almost 2 years of intensive tutoring. He's at the 81st percentile. He's reading above grade level. So that goes to my belief. I've always told my son, and I've always said, like, you can do it. I know you're going to have to work hard, but you can do it. And he's always buckled down, done the work. But I also believe that if you have the right educator paired with the child to meet their need, that any child can excel. And I've always believed that, and I put that to practice with my own child, and it's proven to be good. It's proven to be true.
Wow, that's amazing. Good for him. And you, frankly. Has
And
that
his amazing tutor. She's
Yeah,
worked
and it's
so hard
amazing
with him.
tour. Yeah. Has this cut into your work time, you could say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh,
So
absolutely.
so
Uh,
how have you managed that part?
my supervisors make up the hours when you have time. Again, this comes down to this is why I stay ahead of myself on my workload because you never know when something's going to happen. You get pulled in for a parent-teacher conference, is IEP plans, educational planning. That all takes time. Advocacy takes time. This is where I use my privilege as an academic, right? We have research skills. So what does your child need? Use your academic skills to figure that out because you cannot just rely on the experts to tell you what your kid needs. And when they tell you no, don't take that no as the final answer and push. So I'm a big advocate for my kid. I heard no quite a few times before he finally got a formal diagnosis. And I also knew that, especially with double deficit, with dyslexia in general, it runs in my husband's family. So when I suspected it and I heard that he wasn't able to be diagnosed, I didn't accept that no. I was pretty tenacious and I continued to advocate. And I still tell parents around me to continue to advocate because hearing no the first time doesn't mean your kid doesn't have a need. It means you have to push harder to get the right testing done so that they can diagnose the need and meet their need so they can thrive as learners.
Wow. So you're like, I'm going to put the work in that's needed to get my child what he needs, and I'm going to make that possible by working ahead. So my next logical question then is, how do you do that? Because I mean, maybe as you said earlier, this is just a career level thing. But you
Well, you learn
know,
your workflows. You know when you're busy, the academic year, you know when the academic year starts, start your course planning ahead of time. So, for example, I'll bring it to a current example for my work life now. We'll be adopting a new LMS at Mount Holyoke College. We'll
what's
be
that?
using Canvas,
Oh,
learning
oh,
management system.
yeah,
We'll
yeah.
be adopting a new learning management system next August. Well, when I have downtime right now between tasks, I'm learning that new learning management system, and I'm starting to transfer my course materials over. So I'll be ready with my course materials, probably be 3/4 done before August. I'm just planning ahead. Learn the workflows of academia. You know when you're going to be busy mentoring students, advising students. Don't plan things for those weeks.
Sure.
It's pretty predictable.
So how did you learn the workflow? Like, what would someone early career like me or someone later career who's just not paid attention to this, how would they come at it? Do you just look for patterns in what when you publish, or do you follow sort of the structure of the school year? I guess
You
it
know,
depends a bit on your institution, but
the writing months are from May till probably mid-August, you're writing. You're writing, you're doing your research, you're thinking about what you're going to do in your lab. So September comes, you get students. I don't know if you have students that work under you, but if you have students that you're supervising in your research lab, you want to think about what projects, what areas of the project you want them to work on pushing forward for you. You make sure you train a competent team. So they're doing that piece. You know when your courses are, you know it's what, 14 weeks, 13 weeks. So plan out your courses. When I plan my courses, backwards planning. I don't know what you do. When you're teaching your courses, what process do you go through for building your course plan? It's the same thing with life, backwards plan. So if you want to publish something in September, you want to get it off to for peer review, start working backwards. Um, how long does it take you to write a page? You have to know your productivity times, how long it takes you to write something. Backwards planning is essential.
okay,
Um,
so the school year for you is May to mid-August, you're writing, researching. What's happening late August to April? Just
Finishing up the
you
course,
focus on teaching?
finish. So late August, I'm finishing up the course prep, and I'm teaching from August until December
And you
when
don't do
everyone goes
research
on.
during that time.
No, no, you do stuff in the
Okay.
morning. You do a little bit in the morning.
Oh, I see. Okay.
You don't
Mornings
not do
research.
research.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so a couple hours in the morning, you do research or writing, or any kind of mental fatiguing task. So it's not always research. Sometimes it's grant writing, sometimes it's responding to a sensitive email, but like there's a big meeting coming up, so I'm on the institutional review board. So those really mentally fatiguing tasks you do in the morning.
Gotcha.
Yeah,
And you
so
do that
then
both.
December, and then you have the downtime from December to January, right? And then January classes start up again. So you're course prepping in January, early January, you're course prepping again. And if you're building a new course, it's very busy right then. For you, it would be very busy if it's a new course.
So
For me, it's
December
not
to
busy right now.
January. That's December to January. You're doing course prep, you're getting ready.
Mhm. Yeah, well,
And
you
then,
finish your grading. We all know we got to finish our final grades.
right.
And then you're starting your course prep for the spring semester. Then spring semester follows a similar plan. So you know when your advising weeks are, you know when you're meeting with students, you know when the big deadlines are. You set the deadlines in your own class. You know when you're reading papers if you're doing your own grading. So I'll look and see, okay, when do I have when do I have exams? When am I grading? I won't make appointments those days.
If I can just pick your brain a little longer about this, because I'm interested in the mechanics of this. I find I often fall off because I don't really have like material substrate of the planning down pat. So I used to do like Google Calendar, and I would keep everything in Google Calendar. And then I found like I accidentally had two, and I would not notice the announcements, whatever. So then I was like, okay, I'm going to do my institution's calendar. That didn't work. I'm now to a paper calendar, but sometimes my kids scribble over. So how do you actually track all of this throughout the year? Do you do it in a separate Word document? Do you do it in an Excel sheet? Like, what's that look like tangibly?
Uh, I do use Google Calendar. I was using that little task manager from Google, a little task bar you could write tasks on.
I
That's in
didn't know about
Gmail.
that, but good to know.
But honestly, I'm not going to lie. I still love my paper list. I have a paper list. I have it. I sit down and I plan what I need to do. The best thing, I don't do it every day, but I do it consistently enough. I'd say it's good advice, is think about the day, the next day. Think about on Friday, think about your following week. Look at your Google Calendar, wherever you have all your dates, and start thinking about Monday. What do you need to do Monday? Is there anything big coming up on later in that week that you need to start breaking up into little tasks? Everything's just a little task. So
Yeah.
if I have, for example, my chair asked me to analyze some data and get it to her by March 20th. She's closing her survey March 2nd. And so I was thinking, okay, what do I need to do to make sure that I get this report in by the 20th? I need to chip away at this data analysis a little bit every day or big chunks, but it's really better off a little bit every day because it stays fresh in your mind that way. One of the things that a lot of academics fall into, a lot of students, a lot of people with writing fall into is they think, I'm only going to work on it when I have big chunks of time. The problem though is if you've been away from it too long, as you know, you have to remind yourself, what did you last do? And remind yourself, what do you need to do next? And that also cuts into your efficiency. But if you're chipping away at it, that's great. If you cannot chip away at it every day, leave really good notes for yourself. So if I'm working on coding, I'm doing some statistical analysis, and I'm analyzing different models. And in my mind, I'm like, I wonder if I move this variable or that variable, is this going to improve my statistical model? But I haven't run the code for that yet. But I know in my mind, I want that as my next step. I will leave a coding note for myself in my data file and say, next step, remove variable X, rerun model. So I know I've left breadcrumbs for myself.
Mm,
Be really good at leaving breadcrumbs for yourself.
yeah, I do that a lot because I'm like, I don't trust my pregnancy brain or my postpartum brain. But it sounds like a good tactic generally. It's interesting because what you just shared in terms of the Friday planning for Monday thing, there's a book by Laura Vanderkamp. I think it's called like I Know How She Does It or something, where she studied it, I think 1,000 time diaries of women who are highly productive in really competitive fields, law, maybe academia too, I don't know. And she found this is one of the things they do. They
Oh,
will wake up
really? Oh,
Friday
so
and they
I thought I kind
plan.
of stumbled into the trade secret, I guess.
Yeah, you're just a sage naturally, I suppose. That's great. Do you have any quick hacks before I let you go for making teaching more efficient? This eludes me and eludes many of the scholars I probe on this question.
Make
Uh,
teaching more efficient. What do you mean by that? More
like
efficient.
sort of streamlining
Prepper.
it. So you've said, you do the mentally onerous stuff in the mornings and some of the other stuff later on. Is there any way at any point in the teaching process that you have been able to sort of either find a time of day or find a way of going about some of the responsibilities associated with teaching that's actually helped you do it better or faster?
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So what I do is I have a Google Doc, and every time I course plan for my class, I leave notes for myself on what I'm going to do in that particular class. So for example, if one week my students might be doing a writing workshop with their literature reviews, and I think about the tips and tricks I'm going to give them. I leave really good notes for myself. So next year, when I'm planning out my class, I'm not starting from scratch again. I'm pulling up that week. What did I do with them that week? And then I make modifications for the needs for that subset of students. So that's a really quick way to kind of get your course planning done very efficiently.
Nice. I'm doing something
Yeah.
similar where I keep a diary on the things that aren't working. And then I make
Well,
my presentation materials are very specific and my notes associated with it for myself are very specific. So I'm like, I don't want to have to reinvent this wheel if I teach this again. Um,
yes, oh, absolutely. You have to do that. As an educator, if you want to be a good educator, no, if you want to be an excellent educator, you need to self-reflect. So that's something that I usually do when I get my course evals. So I'll get my final course evals at the end, and then I take notes and I make modifications as needed during my course prep. But I also do mid-semester evals. So these are informal evaluations that I've created for myself that only I see and no one else that my students will complete for me. So I can do mid-course corrections as well. That's a real nice way to make your class efficient too. If something's not working for your students, if something's not working for you, you can use those evals as a way to make modifications in your course, grounded in the feedback you get, or even what you feel you need as an educator. Say, for example, you told your students you wanted them doing reflective journals every week. I had this as an exercise in one of my classes. Well, the grading for that might be more too intensive for me. It might be something that my students find is busy work. It's not working well. I don't need to be dogmatic about keeping it in my syllabus. I can drop it. I literally can change anything. I'm in charge of my class. So if you find something is inefficient for you as an educator, ask yourself, why is it there? Is it absolutely necessary for your learning objectives? What learning objectives are guiding your teaching? And is there another way to come about meeting those goals? So all those self-reflective questions are so important. They'll strengthen your teaching pedagogy and they'll help support your learners.
Wow. Well, that's amazing. I mean, it sounds like, that time to self-reflect for the sake of others, for your students, is really born, in your case, out of the time you spent self-reflecting on your own life as a consequence of this illness that you suffered. So the moral of the story, it seems, is, don't delay these deep questions. Don't use
Oh
academia's
yeah.
of busyness, to ignore the deep questions whose answers can actually help you in the long run become more efficient.
And that and also let love guide your actions. It's not all about efficiency.
Yeah.
Let
Well,
love guide your actions, even with your students. What does this individual student need? You had a deadline on your syllabus and this student is struggling. What does this student need? It's a balance of justice and mercy as an educator.
yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's easy to lose sight of that love, not just for your students, but even love for the truth when you're publishing and you're just, it's very easy to get stuck in the sort of professional blinders of academia, but things like illness will shake us out of it. So we should live in a way, that will prepare us for those possibilities.
Absolutely, absolutely. And if at any point you want to continue the conversation, Charlotte, I'm happy to do that off camera.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that'd be great.
Yeah,
Well, I think this has been great, and I think people will be both amazed and informed by you coming on here and sharing your really vulnerable experience. So thank you for having the courage to do that. I really appreciate it.
thank you for giving me the space, friend.